Let's say the motion was, this House believes that the increasing military securitization of Australasia is good for regional peace, and you are in closing opposition. As is expected, even if this is a debate assessing the benefits and harms of increasing military securitization, the debate will still heavily contest the comparative. Increasing military securitization is supposedly addressing an existing problem, and opposition has to at least explain that less military securitization in the status quo is preferable to increasing military securitization. So if you were in closing opposition, you might observe that the opening half would go as follows. Opening government would explain that increasing military securitization is necessary to unify Southeast Asian nations among one another, with more military spending in defense pacts. And opening opposition would appropriately explain that this could lead to escalation in the region, which could aggravate relations with China and of course be detrimental to trade and the like. This is a typical clash, right? Opening government would respond by saying that tensions are already tense, and we need securitization to have a mediating presence to deter China and have stability. And opening opposition would of course continue to explain that China could retaliate in other ways, just through economic sanctions and the like. They may even go on to explain at opposition that military spending empowers the worst excesses of authoritarianism in these nations, which worsens division, and this makes them more likely to turn to China as well. So again, let's pause here. If you were in closing opposition, I want you to notice this. You have the opportunity to run a crazy, insane hardline extension that would say that Chinese military control in the region is a preferable situation as opposed to increasing military securitization, which would most likely be emboldened by more US presence that is threatening and would be detrimental to the ability of smaller states to negotiate and control the situation because they are left to become proxies. You might be afraid, and rightly so, to run this extension, because it seems to be contradictory to opening opposition's claim that China is bad. So of course, why would you be okay with complete regional control for China? So given this scenario, here are 2 steps to make this extension sellable in the current meta. And I would say that this is good practice in general if you're running strategic extensions like this at closing. First, explain the extension as an even-if scenario. Even if opening government is correct that China will continue to escalate regardless, this is okay, because at least they do so on terms that lead towards stability in the region, according to their interests, and for further economic cooperation and investment that may be beneficial for smaller states, as opposed to a world where military securitization would add more uncertainty because of US proxy interests and because it takes away all means of diplomacy. After this, the second step is to mediate your comparative. Your comparative is not necessarily China having full regional control and hegemony, but it is that we are okay with existing stalemates in the region, even if China has more control. And again, China has no further incentive to encroach beyond the current economic control they have, and any existing control is one that would produce good economic engagement with these smaller states. So you'd say that this is good because without military securitization, it is more likely that these stalemates would produce the same good, mutually beneficial joint economic agreements that would promote more trade and in fact more breathing room for smaller states because they do not have to be caught between 2 superpowers in this conflict. So in fact, what you are doing here is you're still running the hardline extension, but you've sold it in a preferable way that talks about stability, which is a goal of opening opposition, and you've also sold it with respect to existing incentives of these superpowers, which are realistic incentives, which doesn't need to contradict anything from the opening half either. Alright, that's it for today's video. Thank you and have a great day.